What do I mean by that? We now have only the final boss and the secret final boss to do. Now I'm sure there's other stuff I could do, but we only have these two bosses left, so we're gonna go ahead and do those. Now there are these two summons here, which feel very tempting to take right now. Mostly because we hardly ever see summons to begin with in this game, but I'm gonna at least try the bosses solo first. I need to prepare my magic. That's gonna be the case. Dark Orb is pretty good for us, generally, so that's gonna be okay. So is Soul Spear. And here's where it gets interesting now, is when we have these extra slots that I don't necessarily know what I want to do with. Could always just go Repel. Yeah, you know what? Why not? I haven't been practiced or set up or anything at all today, so yeah, gonna be a bit rusty right off the end here, which is about what I would expect. I'm hoping by doing this, the door is actually going to stay open, so that way I can just run through it now, and we'll be back at full HP, which it looks like it's going to be the case. Now, I believe this is where we're supposed to be. We'll see if that ends up being the case. I do see a fog wall down there, so I think we are good to go ahead and fight this final boss. And hopefully, if everything went correctly, which I feel like it should have, the secret final boss. I don't know if it's exactly right after, or if we get like a chance to recover from the final boss or whatnot. But I would hope that we would have a chance to be able to go recover from boss fight instead of being thrown into immediate another one. There are so many summons over here, holy. That sounds like an NPC, that's definitely an NPC. And you're also an NPC. Wow, they give you 3 NPCs for this fight, huh? Or at least potentially. And then we had people summon signs on the other side as well. So this sounds like it's gonna be rough, but we'll see how this goes. With all of that, something seems to tell me that Dark may not be like the right choice for her. But
you have proven yourself to me.
Of course I am.
Be one with the dog.
I didn't agree to all of that now, though. Come on. Okay. I have no idea what any of her attacks are. Oh, I'm getting insta-cursed just by being next to her. Oh, okay, then. Okay, so you've got, like, laser attacks or something? We are just smacking her. Holy. Soul Spear couldn't work. Nope. Just use that. I really can't hit him right there. Good old Dark Lord. Should be able to live closer before he all that. Now, mind you, this boss was probably meant, I mean, this is the final boss of the main game, right? So it was probably meant for you to not do the DLC and fight her immediately at the time that the boss was created before the DLC. So we might actually be over-leveled for these ones. It doesn't mean we can't get a one-shot, though. But every boss in this game has clearly shown us that. So. Yeah, that's about what I expected. Finally, that dark barrier she had around her is down, so I won't be getting qualified anymore and taking unnecessary max HP damage for no reason, other than just for existing. She's very, so far, slow and methodical. I can't imagine this is the boss fight. Like, this is kind of reload right now. Maybe this is a lot more difficult as a melee because then you're getting constantly hollowed, so then your max HP is just like dropping at all points in time. That's the laser attack. I haven't practiced at all today, so she's kind of just letting me wail on her at this point. She seems to always only do a single attack with that so far. I actually could have done that boss entirely hitless if I just wasn't greedy there. Yeah, I did. I really didn't expect that to be as easy as that was.
One drowned in poison, another succumbed to flame. Still another slumbers in the realm of life. Not one of them stood here. As you do.
I can only... I'm pretty sure I can guess who's talking
You,
here.
conqueror of adversity.
There's only one real person that we haven't killed yet. That
Give us your answer.
Oh, what? Whoa, wait. Oh, okay, can I talk to you? I'm trying to talk. Okay, never mind, not talking to you anymore. I definitely don't want to get hit by that. That looks like it hurt quite a bit. Right, so how about that repel, though? What is this doing? To be real with you, I have no idea what I was supposed to be expecting out of that spell. You're taking like half damage now for doing that, so I'm gonna imagine that I probably knocked you into your next phase or something. Okay, just straight up disappeared. Hey, this. Okay, you're no longer taking reduced damage, so by all means. Oh, that follows. Oh, okay, that follows. I thought it was a straight line attack. Oh, okay, well. Oh, we're back in this again. Well, we dodged it, so I'll take it. Hey, you're back to taking reduced damage. Except now you're taking damage. So we've got a decent amount of time to hit this dude in the face before we have to worry about that fireball. I thought I was going to have to use repel, but that's an actually decently easy dodge there. Which now it's taking reduced damage again. Oh no. Yep, that's going to hurt. Alright, chill. I think he's faced the wrong way too, so I think we're okay in that regard. That probably acts along. Yeah, that's about what I figured. Acts about the same as what the other magic that does. No, dude! I probably could have beat that guy on my first try, and then I fall through the wall. That's so me, though. Oh, no. Dude, I could have beat that guy first try, 100%. I actually straight up walked off the edge of the map. Do I have to fight those two back to back? That's probably what it is, right? I gotta imagine it's me fighting those two back to back and why that boss felt easier. Could also be just because we were ranged. The fact that maybe she's like, maybe she's not as adept at range as she is at melee. I mean, she did have that whole scythe and whatever. And her only real ranged attack was that laser that didn't really even follow us. So I'm gonna imagine we have to fight those two back to back. If we just straight up have to fight this guy, like, I think we're good. My staff also won't be breaking as well, and we'll actually have more Estus now, because if we're just straight up fighting him again, then I'll get the extra 3 Estus back that I used on her. I'll also get all the uses of my magic back immediately. I mean, started to get some back with Crown there, but Crown's relatively slow in giving it back. What it does give back when it does is pretty good. But yeah, the procs on it are a little slow at times. Imagine being NPCs to beat this final boss, you know what I'm saying? Gotta be. Oh, I see. We don't even want to go through the semantics or nothing. We're just going straight to fight. I got you. Okay, if you're gonna be taking reduced damage right now, then I'll just use my break. I don't know why now you're deciding you want to take reduced damage. It's kind of like 100k souls. I kind of want this. That's like 2 levels, maybe. I do have repel for these. One of those still hits. Ah, okay. I was breathing there. I could have just rolled out of the way to dodge him. I was testing to see if repel could actually dodge all 4 of them. You can block 3 of them with repel, but by the 4th time it gets to you, it runs out. That's only our 2nd time ever fighting him, and arguably the 1st time we could have killed him. Now I'm just kind of experimenting on him more than anything. If I knew the bosses were going to be as quick as this, I would have just done it yesterday, but I didn't know. I didn't know if we were going to have another night fiasco or another lonely sinner fiasco, because some of those guys certainly took me a lot longer than what it probably should have, but also we fought the lonely sinner. We definitely fought underleveled. The night guy was just like the perfect nightmare of a boss for me to fight. This guy seems manageable. Like, this seems doable. Yeah, really just gonna put a bonfire right next to the boss, right? If I don't, I get always, I'm sure I've said it multiple times, but like if I don't have to fight any enemies to get back to the boss, why not just put a bonfire right next to the boss? Like, save me the trouble of having to run back there. Like, I literally used nothing to get back here, so what's the difference between putting a bonfire, I don't know, somewhere in this area, maybe like right here, and then just keep running into the boss, rather than me waiting for the door every time to open, run down here, and then do this again, outside of it taking longer to get back to the boss. Anyways. That lasts longer than I think it does. He's gonna get me one of these ones. He's kind of weird. Like, sometimes, like, we get full damage on him, and then sometimes, like, it just gets mitigated for whatever reason. I guess in his fire phase is when damage is mitigated. I probably could just be rolling out of that and not be taking damage. Okay. Okay, for sure I know what it is now. When he's in his fire phase, that's when he gets the mitigated damage. Just gonna assume that that's probably gonna hit me soon. I casted that beyond too late. That was a lot faster of a projectile than I thought it would be. You don't think I know how to dodge magic? I've been using it the entire game. I know how to dodge magic. It doesn't always work sometimes because the AI coding in this game for magic is insane. Pure magic though, no. But the AI absolutely. I got too close to it that time is what happened. Rolled my big noggin straight into one of those fireballs that last time, which is how I ended up getting hit by it, which was unfortunate. Man, it keeps activating that half damage phase so early. I could probably straight up just use repel on that attack and not even attempt to dodge it. It's not like a crazy attack or anything there. I almost almost like it when you throw the large fireball at me instead of the regular little ones, because the big fireball is when you always take full damage. Okay. There we go. Yeah, running at the magic there, or I guess running at it and dodging seems to be the way to go. I missed a lot more when I did that this time. Still experimenting with some of those attacks. Like that one, it seems like running at it is better. I tried going right, left, right, and it still seemed like they were hitting me a bit more, so running at it seems to be the way to go. Or you could probably start off with the left and then front. And I did left, front, right, and we managed to dodge all of those. I didn't even move in that miss. So I don't know if that attack is actually meant to hit you, or if it's supposed to scare you into doing something. Alright, so left, forward. Okay, I think I rolled too early on that one, that's why I ended up getting. This staff is probably going to end up breaking this fight, but considering it's the final boss, I'm not too worried about it. I also have repair powder and stuff. Our new armor is definitely putting in work, though. Glad that we actually spent that to make it worthwhile. I ran out of stamina to dodge that correctly. Come on, throw a giant fireball back at me again. That's not what I meant to press. What are you doing? What are you doing? I don't know what that means. Apparently you got a lot more defense. At least in that point he was taking like next to no damage. This is a very weird boss. It, in a way, doesn't even feel like a boss fight. It feels like a cooldown from what the final boss I would have thought it had been, but we're probably just over leveled. I mean, considering we're playing the base game after doing the entirety of the DLC. And I don't imagine the DLC was released at the same time as the game. Not 100% sure. Or if that does end up being the case, then it's probably like over leveled. Okay, starting to do a lot more damage now. You hate to see that. He's also not doing his big fireball attack anymore, where I can do real sorts of damage. If you don't use it on the first three and accept that you're just gonna get hit by one, then you may as well just not use repel on that attack. Because by the time you cast it, you're gonna be far off. I can definitely see this being, or what I would imagine to be a lot more of a struggle for melee, especially if that fire around him actually does damage to him. So I want to try and trick this guy into moving from the looks of it, because that's when his defense wears off. Yeah, I did not think that was going to spawn exactly where it did, but it did. Okay, this is the attack I would want to see. And then we just accept that we're not going to get all the damage we want. I popped that too late yet again. We're out of Estus, but I've got like 1 million healing items. Alright, love to see it. We can get like 3 or 4 off, and then nice, we got it. We straight up blocked this man's like. He's out here trying to pull Super Saiyan spirit bombs out on me, and I'm just throwing up repel. Oh, come on. That was early. And yet, it was early, yet we were able to reflect it all with repel. Okay, so repel is just like your best friend in this boss fight. Straight up can probably block every one of his attacks with it. Yeah, okay. Well, repel Ps5. We're just good. Unless you have another stage, you're kind of like just dead there, Brandon. Yeah, okay, I didn't know these boss fights were gonna be as easy as what they were. We totally could have beat that guy on the first try. I'm upset that I didn't because I fell in the stupid hole.
Friend will send to you. But the question remains.
You're still alive?
What do you want from me?
I want Pilgrim to come out sooner, but, you know, we still got, what, 26 days away or something for it. So. Proceed to the throne, baby. Okay, we just got a bunch of golems just chilling. No, am I gonna walk on your guys' back to get to the throne? I can see that. Yeah, that's about what I figured based on the cutscene there.
You who link the fire. You who bear the curse. Once the fire is linked, souls will flourish anew, and all of this will play out again. It is your choice to embrace or renounce this.
Well, apparently if I do it, everything's gonna start over again, so I shall renounce the flame, and given the opportunity. And I don't fat finger it, which is definitely something that could happen. Those fights felt free, which really makes me think that I overleveled for him, unfortunately.
Great Sovereign.
But then,
take your
I don't think you could have gone to the DLC after beating these guys, so, like, I guess it was just bound to happen regardless. I guess I could have beaten the entire game the first time before going to the DLC and then go into it.
What lies ahead, only you can see.
Is that a throne? Is that supposed to be a throne, or am I just throwing myself in the prison here? Because the door's kind of just closed on me as soon as I sat in the door. They're like, yeah, go to the throne. Psych, and they just like lock me up forever. They're like, he's too powerful. Put him down. Okay, my camera decided to not want to focus. All right, well, that's the end of the game. I thought those boss fights were going to be a lot harder than what they were, so that's why I was like, we'll do it next stream, because I don't know how long it was going to take me to take Natalina out, and then on top of her, I didn't know how crazy the final boss was going to be. Okay, well, I was expecting this to go a lot longer than what it did here. Maybe we can start Dark Souls 1? Maybe. I want to say I have it installed. If I don't, I would have to wait for it to download, which shouldn't take too long, if anything. I don't think Dark Souls 1 actually was that big of a game in general in terms of amount of gigabytes worth. But anyways, as we do with all of them, just my general thoughts on the game. Dark Souls 2, it was good. Enemy variety was good. The storytelling was fine. The Covenants existed, which is pretty much what I say for all the other ones. I don't really care about the Covenants. It's nice that they exist and you can get rewards for doing them, but I just don't really care about them all too much. The NPCs were cool. No really complaints on that. The bosses were definitely very hit or miss. There was a lot of them, which was nice, but then there was some really poor quality. Sounds harsher than what it should be. There was a lot of bosses that felt like they just needed to have a boss title, but they weren't Dark Souls boss quality of what you would expect a Dark Souls boss to be. Like, one of the fights was like straight up 2 clerics and some of the prisoner guys which was essentially, you may as well have thought of it as a regular Dark Souls room, outside of the fact that it had, you know, the boss name with HP bar or whatever, but essentially it was just another room at that point, just with the NPC with the boss HP bar. And then you get some crazy ones like the night fight, which, after beating the game now, I would say is the hardest boss fight in the game, at least as a range, because the fact that your magic always misses, well, that it misses like 50% of the time, which is huge. I mean, that's already 50% damage reduction right there, just based on something you can't control, which is just hoping that auto lock targets him correctly. He was also extremely fast. He could hit you across the room, so no matter what range you were at, you were never safe. All of his attacks were very fast. Very fast. Like, I was only ever able, like, when we went into the boss fight solo, I was only ever able to get one magic cast off at a time without taking a ton of damage. Which you can probably imagine that would have taken far longer had we not used the summons, but then again, the DLC was meant to be played as co-op, so fair enough. Trying to think of, like, what some of the funnest bosses were to fight. I did like fighting the DLC dragon. I liked fighting, and then you might be like, you still use like NPC summons or whatever. And it's like, that's kind of true, but really, he still focused way more than the actual NPC itself. Now, really, the only thing having the NPC did for me there, instead of, really the only thing it did for me there is every once in a while take aggro off of me so I could potentially heal without being focused 100% of the time. It still felt like a challenge though, like, even though we may have not caught 100% aggro, it was probably still like, bare minimum 50-50, maybe closer to the 75-25 on ours. So that was a fun fight. The Ivory King co-op was a fun fight. Just the utter chaos that was me, 3 other guys that I had summoned in there, along with the 4 other knights on us, where we all just went ham and like just slaughtered the other knights as soon as we had the same amount of people. As soon as it became a fair fight in terms of numbers, like, that fight felt a lot more fun to me. Like, it definitely didn't seem like you were supposed to solo that. We made it insanely difficult too when we originally went in there, when it was just me and 1 other knight. That was a bit of a joke. The fact that we still made it to the boss, even under those conditions, though, was pretty crazy. Also, as a caster as well, I do generally think that this game lends itself more towards the melee combat, which is fine, it's understandable. I just feel like if you're gonna allow for a ranged option, then there's certain quality of life changes that need to happen. Like, the auto-targeting needed to be better. If you're gonna be ranged, you should probably also increase the auto-targeting lock-on distance. Because, you know, for a melee, if you're swinging at somebody's legs, the auto lock-on for the boss doesn't matter as much because, you know, or at least the range of it. Because at the end of the day, you're going to be sitting there swiping at the dude's legs or whatever the boss is, right? Whereas a range caster, you know, if I've got to be standing back 3-4 times the distance that a melee fighter could potentially be, then I don't necessarily need that much more of a range increase, but there definitely needs to be a auto lock range increase for sure for ranged characters. or like a ranged class. I'm not necessarily sure how you would do that. I guess if you went based off of what you originally picked at the beginning of the game, you could give it as a specific perk to that class. Kind of like you got to pick off with what starting item you were going to have at the beginning of the game, you know, out of the select few that it had given to you. Which, of course, we both auto-rolled our starting class as well as auto-rolled our item that we received at the beginning of the game. So, in an attempt to make it more difficult, which I would say it probably did as opposed to a melee fighter, I really don't think there was all too many fights where I would have been like ranged was like the better option. Now there was still some, don't get me wrong, like clearly they threw a few bosses in there that were like, okay, we need to make sure that ranged has a better time and melee suffers, but most of the time it felt like melee was gonna do fine in every boss fight, and then ranged was take it or leave it. I would say quality of life change, definitely the Estus needed to happen, which I believe they did do in Dark Souls 3, so that's already been finished. Definitely better bonfire placement, for sure, in some of the areas, especially those DLC areas, and just, I mean, even right there at the final boss fight, the fact that we didn't have a bonfire in front of the final boss. Like, I get it, it's not, like, too crazy of a run or anything, but, like, why add that extra minute or two run, you know, between every attempt? Because then that, you know, if you gotta fight that boss 10 or 20 times, and let's say 20, right? That's an extra 40 minutes of purely just running back to the boss. Now, it'd make a little bit of a difference, right, if you were fighting enemies to get there, you know, because then you have the inherent difficulty of you could potentially take more or less damage getting there, you could use more or less resources, stuff like that. That makes a bit more sense. When you don't have enemies between you and the boss, originally, then adding that bonfire right in front of the boss, the only thing it changes is the amount of time it takes you to get bodied, go back in there and get bodied again. Which maybe they make that run as like a cool-off period, where if you just keep getting destroyed or whatever, that extra minute, you know, like gives you time to calm yourself, I suppose, and the fact that, like, that way you don't just like rage quit at the boss or whatever, which if that's the case, I suppose that's understandable. But yeah, just like generally putting the bonfires closer if there's not going to be enemies. If there's going to be enemies, that's fine, then you can keep the bonfire distance the same. Let's see here, for the inventory, using items, when you can use multiple of them, sometimes you couldn't always, and you would have to use it singularly, and that made it take a lot longer. So it's just like these little things. I mean, it's not like, oh, that's going to keep me from playing the game or whatever, but it's a nice quality of life change when I can go down to, like, my souls or something like that, and if I've got, like, 10 of them or something, be like, oh, let me crush all 10 at the same time, which I believe they also did fix in Dark Souls 3, so, some of this stuff, naturally, has already been fixed due to the, later releases of this game, but just as a just going through this game in general. Oh my, words are hard sometimes. For showing stats, I would want to see, like, showing all this stats is perfect, right? But this is all base stuff. Like, have this screen and then give me another screen that shows all of my stats, plus the armor that I'm wearing. So instead of having like 160 magical bonus, show that magical bonus with my staff, with my gear and stuff, you know, so I get a more real idea of what my actual stats are looking like. Because otherwise I'm just looking at base stats and I'm like, 77 physical defense, really? and I mean, we know I picked a range class, so that's understandable. And then you look at the rest of our stats right there, and it's like 177 plus, and you're like, oh, okay. But then, of course, none of this is being augmented by my weapons or by my gear, which makes it a lot harder to be like, okay, which one do I need to potentially target to increase in order to help me fight some of the other bosses? Because you can definitely focus your build to a certain enemy. We've done that plenty of times, where I was like, okay, the X magic doesn't work well against this guy. We'll be like, okay, thunder magic didn't work well against this guy, so then we'll switch to pyro. Pyro didn't work, okay, we'll switch to dark, and then so on and so forth. So you can definitely fix your build that help fight bosses, but it seems like you're lacking some critical information by not including the gear in there. As for like actual inventory and stuff, this is I would say this is kind of clunky in a sense. It's kind of all just thrown into one big inventory. If there was a way to organize it more, that'd be helpful. Like if you were able to be like a bow section, a shield section, or whatever, you know, more so like actual tabs rather than everything just getting dumped in here. Then otherwise you gotta be like, oh, where'd I put my shield again? Then you gotta look through the specific ones. And then it also the weaponry that you upgrade goes to the same side as the shields. So like if I took this foot soldier shield and upgraded it to +3, +5, or whatever, it's still gonna show it in this line, but it could potentially be buried between these three. So like this could be like +0, +0, this one could be +3, or it could get fed into a different area, in which case it makes it a little harder. And when you're looking at, you know, an entire wall of items right here, and you're like, oh, let me find what specific sword I want, and then you see there's what, about 6 across, and then as your inventory fills up, that makes it even harder to see what you need to see. So there's some of that. As for the actual fighting, the enemies and stuff, most of it was pretty good. I would say leashing was a bit of a nuisance in this game. It is feel very consistent between enemies. Like some enemies we could leash from like way far away, like back in the fire area. What, we would go from the bridge all the way back to the beginning bonfire and people would still chase us. But then some enemies you would leave like a single room for like 5 seconds and then they would just completely forget about you. And then you're able to cheese them that way. So yeah, a little inconsistency in that as well. What else? Is there anything else really? Oh, always having to go back to this specific bonfire to deal with your, to use the sublime bone dust and getting your Estus fixed was kind of annoying. It really felt like you should have been able to do that at any bonfire and have the effect be just the same. Maybe they wanted it to be special, to be like, oh, so you can use this NPC more, or because, you know, they wanted this area to be your main base of, you know, just doing whatever you need to do. As we can see, like, all of our NPCs that are still alive are generally here. You know, there's still some spread throughout the land, of course, but generally they're within this area. Overall, a good game. If you like Dark Souls, you're probably gonna play it. Would you play it more than one time? That depends. At least for me, that depends. If I was going to play it again, I would more than likely just play it without the DLC and play the base game. The DLC was passable. Could I potentially see myself playing it again? Yeah, for like certain boss fights and stuff. And some of the areas were just really annoying for no real reason. Like the reindeer just attacking me out of nowhere. No second boss fire as like a halfway marker that'd be like, okay, now you can start from here, like cutting your journey in half. Which, considering we had to run through that snow area so many times in a row, and then just to potentially die at the end by 2 random reindeer that spawn because they're random spawns and that they're not just patrolling the area, the game will just decide to randomly send them at you at some point. So yeah, that was kind of annoying. I wouldn't say ruined the DLC for me, but it definitely brought it down a little bit in the fun that I had in the DLC, do the stuff like that. Which maybe you could consider it pacing within the area itself. It could be like a pacing problem to it. Overall, still a fun game. I don't regret playing it at all. It's Dark Souls. I love playing the Dark Souls game. I'm really looking forward to Elden Ring when that comes out. I mean, we've already done Bloodborne, the entire thing with the DLC. We've done Dark Souls 3, the entire thing with the DLC. We've now added Dark Souls 2, everything plus the DLC now. Every boss is complete. So we beat every boss in this game so far. Now we just have Dark Souls 1 to do that with as well. We might end up doing that here in a second. I don't remember if I actually have it downloaded yet or not, or installed rather. If I do, then we can at least start on it. If I don't, then maybe this is just gonna be a shorter stream, and then I'll have it downloaded, and then we'll play it later. I do want to get the Legends of Arceus. I did get that, so I do want to play that. I imagine people are probably still playing that still within like the first week of the release of the game, so I definitely do want to end up playing that here. I should have everything I need from what I was seeing in videos and stuff in order to be able to port off the Switch on here to do that. I just need to, because this is connected to the PS5, I've got to take it out of the PS5 and then connect it to the Switch, which would take some time. I'd also have to stop streaming for sure, because then it wouldn't be getting the feed from here, in which case you guys wouldn't be getting anything. So yeah, I was really expecting the stream to be like a 2+ hour stream for sure. I thought it was going to take me maybe an hour to an hour and a half on each of those bosses, but it seems like we were, I don't know, because like I would say generally over leveled, but like our damage against them was not even that high. I mean, we kept hitting them for what, about 138? So it's not even like we were just outright smashing them. When we got Soul Spears off, we certainly chunked them, but it's not like we speed ran through those bosses. Although we just beat Nuggle, you know, in one try, didn't we? So, you know, and then what, the Scholar, the first in there in 3 tries? 3 or 4 tries? So, they definitely didn't seem like the hardest bosses in Dark Souls, which is what I was expecting them to be, at least for Dark Souls 2, to have those bosses be the, you know, the hardest one in the game, because that's what you would expect, or generally expect from the game. But, I totally could have been over leveled. It wouldn't surprise me if that was the case, because this is still a new game file. This isn't like new game plus 7 or something like that. So, and we're at what, 176 or so?
Bearer of the until.
Right, I probably talked to the bonfire or something, and then it would start a new game. But yeah, we finished it at 176. Seems ever so slightly high, but really that was more so I could test out all the magic in the game between intellect and faith. I really wish that being a magical user in this game was more worthwhile, but the fact that I was using Dark Orb, which is like the baseline of dark magic, And Soul Spear, which is probably about intermediate arcane magic, to beat the final boss of the game, kind of shows you the level of what the spells gave me to work with, really. Like, the fact that I'm using just about baseline skills, if we're talking Dark Orb, and, like, low the medium level requirements for Soul Spear, kind of shows that the magic wasn't really that great. Now, I definitely could have just used some of the magic wrong. I'm not saying like all the magic in the game is bad. I'm just saying, at least for the way that I played, it generally didn't come off as being very, very helpful. Like the fact that we probably used Soul Arrow plus Dark Orb for 90% of the game, or Soul Arrow or Dark Orb between those two, just interchanging between those two. Yeah. Magic definitely could have been better. I definitely could have used it wrong, in which case maybe if I had used it in its correctly intended ways, maybe that could change my mind. But yeah. Pyromancy always felt useless. Like I really wanted to make Pyromancy good because it was cool and whatever. Like I was like, okay, Pyromancy, yeah, sure. But it really just did nothing for me. It had no range. It took too long to actually charge whatever attack you were doing. And even when it did hit, it seemed as though either most bosses were resistant or it would do the same damage as like my arcane damage or my dark damage, in which case I was like, well, why not? Why would I not just use those instead, which are faster, generally have more uses, and have longer range? Like, it was just like Pyromancy was outclassed by both Dark and Arcane at all points in time. So it really felt like there was no place for it outside of the very few bosses that actually were weak to fire. And even then, it still didn't feel like that great of an option. Like when we were fighting Medusa or whatever. Now, granted, we didn't have the poison done at the time, so we had to deal with the poison under us, which kind of kept, I wouldn't say insta-killing us, but it certainly didn't leave us in favorable positions at any point in the fight. And as soon as I ended up turning off the poison in that area off camera, I ended up killing her in like the first try after that, because all of a sudden it was like after I didn't have to constantly roll, heal, roll, heal, roll, heal. Instead, I was able to just dodge her and then heal whenever I ended up getting clipped. All of a sudden, it just changed the entire outcome of the fight by not having to deal with the constant toxin on me. Dark magic was interesting. I mean, I really liked Repel towards the end. Like, it's expensive, don't get me wrong. Like, three slots is crazy at a regular new game standpoint. Now when you look towards your new games plus 3 plus 5 or whatever, that might be more realistic. But at a new game, 3 slots, I believe I could only hold about 8 or so. Yeah, that was approximately almost half my magic I could hold for a single spell, but this spell is actually broken as far as I'm concerned. The fact that I could use it in boss fights was fantastic. It was like the saving grace. It was like if I knew I couldn't dodge an attack, this was my go-to. And it generally worked out for us. Now, I did mistime it multiple times, as we saw in the last couple of boss fights. But when it did work, it saved us like 50% plus of our HP, like on attacks that would have hit us, which is insane to think about. But yeah, that was generally what I was really liking in Dark Magic, was Repel and Dark Orb. Dark Hail was an interesting skill, it just never worked out, because if you hadn't seen Dark Hail before. It's essentially like a fanfire of baby dark magic, which is fine. You know, I guess it's just supposed to more so catch people, like if they're rolling or whatever, and you spray it, and you normally would have missed a skill, but because of its fanfire, it hit them. The problem being is that it just never really did any damage when it did hit, because it shoots out, I want to say 5 to 7 projectiles, but you gotta understand, you know, if 100% of the power is spread across those 5 to 7 projectiles, you could potentially only be hitting for 20% or less, depending on if they hit, you know, if only one of those or 2 of those hit or something like that. So you're already taking a massive cut in damage. It was just more so like, oh, so I actually hit them at least. I don't remember if we actually ever used Dark Fog. Like poison. We had the pyromancy poison one, and it just never really seemed to work on anybody, and the one time that it did, it was ticking for like 18 damage or something, which is like not even worth it, so kind of threw that away. Affinity, I think, is probably a good enough PvP spell. The idea of being able to cast magic above your head, so that way you can then focus on either dodging or have a constant pressure of the enemy could potentially get hit by your attack, was good. 9 uses is decent for magic in this game. Its cost was very high though, so it's kind of hard to be like, yeah, this magic was good. 3 cost, which is relatively high, and then your stats had to be relatively large as well. I mean, the fact that you have to be level 64 in general just to use the magic. Now you could be like Simpleton Spice plus the Intelligence Spice or whatever, the ones that reduce faith and intelligence. It's like, yeah, sure, but how many are those of you willing to do in a single spell? So even if you're like, I'm gonna use 10 or whatever, right? Okay, you still have to get the level 54 to even attempt to use this. And this is you going all in, essentially, on a skill. I mean, if we're thinking 54, 64 levels, that's a third, approximately about a third of my levels right there, just to use this spell. What else? Dead Again never worked for us. I imagine it works on skeletons or something. I just really never found a use for it. So that was unfortunate. Whispers of Despair. I don't know if it's like a programming error or if it's just me reading into it wrong or something. Because it says reduce the defense of opponents. And when I read that, it just says defense. So when I'm thinking of when you're going to make physical defense and magical defenses different, but you only say defense, I imagine that means for both. From what we've seen, it's generally been meaning physical defense, which seems weird to me because why would you have it, why would you require magical uses or, you know, stats put into magic in order for you to be able to use a spell that reduces physical defense, because that doesn't, you know, that doesn't outright help you as a caster. So I think the spell is usable, but it seems like a very offhand, like, this is something you might grab as a melee just to increase your damage at some points. Like if people are very physical damage resistant, then you could throw this out there to weaken it and then potentially get back your damage. Repel, we know Repel. I love Repel, it's good. It's expensive, but worthwhile. Twisted Barricade is the poor man's Repel, is the best way I could describe it. It reflects spells. It doesn't reflect them at the person that casted it, though. So essentially, if you threw it straight at somebody, it might like bounce off to the left or something, or off to the right or whatever. It's not going to go back and reflect at them. So it's straight up just for reflection of magic. Most enemies in this game don't generally use magic. and the ones that do are usually not that huge a problem. So Twisted Barricade was really just poor man's Propel. It was like, oh, you couldn't use this? Here's slightly cheaper in terms of the slots that you have to use. So you get more uses of it. It requires less stats, but in general, I didn't find it to be that good of magic. Dark Greatsword is essentially magic greatsword, but dark damage. So it does damage. It does do damage. A little expensive at 2, with only 3 uses as well. The big problem with Dark Greatsword, much like the other Greatsword magics, is that it leaves you you have to be really close to the enemy, which already puts you in trouble, especially as a ranged fighter, because you generally don't invest as much into HP and defense. So if you're willing to get close to like that and stuff, you have to hope that the spell's really worth your HP, because more than likely you're gonna get hit, and worth whatever damage it is that you need in order to do stuff. It generally just didn't do that for me, so I didn't really use it. Recollection, relatively cheap, still a very high stat requirement for what it was. Decent amount of magic usage. You would throw it up in the air, and then it would spawn multiple dark orbs that would track. Problem is, they generally didn't do all that much damage, and the tracking was minimal. Also, the actual casting time of the magic took quite some time. So, cool idea, just didn't really reflect that in the damage being done or the amount of time that it took to use it. Scraps of Life. Essentially, if you've seen me use Chaos Storm and stuff, instead of your dude like plunging his fist into the ground to create the fire that would spike all around you, essentially it's that but dark. Relatively cheap, and you get 4 uses, which, considering those attacks generally have about that amount, it's usable. It's just the same problem with all the close range spells, is that you generally don't have that much HP as range, you generally don't have that much defense. So you really need it to hit hard in order for it to be usable, as compared to, like, why would you not just use a range attack where you could potentially get the same damage but also go through way less risk. So, usable, you just need to have enough HP to make it worthwhile, and then you need to make sure that the spell is actually worthwhile in terms of the damage it puts out. Dark Storm, essentially Soul Vortex but dark. Soul Vortex did not wow me at all, was very not impressed by it. It has the most baby amount of tracking, it takes very long to fire off, and the damage it does is like minimal. Its actual travel speed is quite low as well. So, like, I guess if you needed an AoE spell, you could use it, but just know that you would have to spam it multiple times in order to clear the room. Which you could make there being a case for, but there's probably better magical AoE spells out there. These spells that took souls and did damage with them, I never really used them. You get massive amounts of uses of them. They never gave me the math or anything for, like, how many souls are required to get X amount of damage out of them, so, and they just generally came off as too much of a gamble for me. Also, the fact that they would want me to go out of my way to farm spells to use a spell to then drain me of my souls in order to do damage just did not appeal to me at all. The 22 uses is nice, but depending on how many souls it takes, like, how you ever gonna get 22 uses out of it? So, like, if it costed 10k, which already sounds expensive, and you had 22 uses, well, you'd have to have 220k souls on you to be able to use all of this spell? Like, yeah, no, I'm gonna put that in the levels, thanks but no thanks. And Great Resonant Soul, same thing. Climax, same thing, except this is more powerful, but extremely expensive at 4 cost. You gotta be bare minimum level 77 without the incense to actually use it. It just, like, if the only reason you would have this would be like if you're like me and I wanted to check out every magic in the game if at all possible. Otherwise, yeah, no one in their right mind would really be using this spell. Life Drain Patch, it's basically about the same level as all my other soul draining spells, where it just kind of exists and generally didn't feel worth it to me. Profound, still a very good PvP spell, especially if you fought somebody like me that was a straight up mage only, because it silences you from being able to use your magic, your chimes as well. So if you're straight up only an intellect and a faith builder, like I did for this playthrough, then you're absolutely boned if somebody casts this on you. We've seen this plenty of times when I was going to the Smelter Demon, and the enemies in that area would use Profound Still, and I was unable to cast any of my magic, so I'd have to sit there for the next like 20 or 30 seconds dodging Smelter Demon attacks while waiting for my magic to come back. Very annoying. Definitely a PvP spell. I don't know if it even works in PvE. But really, every mage in this game has like melee as well if they somehow can't use their magic, from what I've seen, and still slaps you for a decent amount of damage even with that. So at PvE it didn't really seem useful. PvP, I imagine this is like a go-to spell for fighting against mages. Dark Dance, probably one of the most disappointing spells in the game for me. The fact that I needed 82 levels to even cast the spell is ridiculous. 2 cost is about average, so that's not bad. 3 usage for this high of magic is generally not bad. Yeah, it's just another one of those where it required souls in order to be usable. And yeah, no, it just really didn't do nothing for me. Soul Arrow, old reliable, low damage, but you got a ton of it. You could stack it. Like if I stacked all 3 right there, that would be 96 uses. So generally enough to get it done. You didn't need much intelligence at all to actually be able to wield it. And you got to use Arcane, which generally does decent to pretty much every enemy in the game from what I noticed. So just to have access to the arcane damage is pretty good. Great Soul Arrow, Heavy Soul Arrow, Great Heavy Soul Arrow. All of these felt useless. They took too long for what damage they did. Like, you probably could have done the same amount of damage in the same amount of time just casting Soul Spear, so it never felt like a real reason to use them. Heavy Homing Soul Arrow. It has good tracking. The problem with it is it's very slow, so it's very easy to dodge. Even with all that tracking, it just moves too slowly. So I dumped that one pretty quick. Homing Soul Mass and Crystal Homing Soul Mass are definitely PvP spells. Only 3 uses, that's not a problem in PvP. Usually people are dying pretty quickly, so 3 uses of the spell is fine. PvE, not so much. But similar to Affinity, the ability to place the magic above your head and then either focus on dodging or attacking while knowing that you're under the protection of your spell is generally what you would be looking for as a mage in PvP. So, usable, but generally for PvP more than PvE. Soul Spear, you can use this in PvE or PvP. Very good spell. Very cheap for only requiring 1 cost. 40 intellect is a bit high. 2 uses is not that high, but it does plenty of damage. It also doesn't do what pretty much any other spell in this game seems to do, which is pierce enemies. Now this is huge for PvE. The fact that you could send it through 5 different enemies plus, like depending on how far the range of the spell goes, is massive. Absolutely worthwhile. Never regret Soul Spear. Soul Spear was probably, as soon as I got in, like every one of my builds against bosses. It was just good damage, it had good range, relatively good targeting, and the pierce is just priceless. Soul Spear Barrage, if you landed all of it, it was good damage, but it took very long. It stuck you in one place, you had to wait for it. Usable, not very efficient, but if you needed the damage and a boss had a long enough opening for you to take, for you to cast it, you'd get rewarded for it. Soul Shower, it would shoot up into the air and rain down arcane bullets, essentially, on people. Not... even the magic itself said it's not very usable, and they're right in that. Because generally, if you're shooting up into the air and then raining it down on people, you have to bait people into that area in the first place. It also took relatively long to go up. So, not the greatest, but on very large enemies, like the bosses and stuff, if you could bait them into that general area and have them stick in it, then it did decent damage. But, yeah, just a very niche spell. Actual requirements are pretty cheap, as is, and 6 uses is pretty good for most spells. So a great sword, if you could get close and get the damage in and get out, not bad. Otherwise, I would say just stick to the ranged spells. Soul Vortex, we generally covered that with the dark magic, so that's weird about that. Soul Bolt. This was very disappointing, and I hate the fact that I wasted so many resources getting to it. But so Soul Bolt, your dude holds your staff up in the air, and then it shoots at like a diagonal down onto the ground, and then fires towards the enemy. Now, the fact that your spell throws half of its damage into the ground is already concerning. But then the other half was relatively easily dodged, just made this generally not useful. It took forever to cast. The amount of intellect you need is insane, because that intellect requirement was even higher before I used the incense on it. And you only get 3 uses. So, like, unless somebody was right on top of you and you were using that spell, generally not worthwhile. If you could get away with the boss standing right at you and they couldn't hit you or something and you cast it, you would get decent damage. But just another one of those niche ones where, like, the amount of things that had to go right for you to make it a worthwhile spell to use was just not something that came along very often. Another disappointment, Soul Geyser. Extremely high requirement in terms of the intellect, that's even with incense put on it. Very cheap in the amount of slots that it takes, but you only get 1 use, which is ridiculous. Like, 1 use in magic, you may as well just not even use it. The only saving grace for it was that it pierced, and it's essentially crystal magic in the fact that it does extra damage just for being what it is. In theory, it had targeting to where the main projectile would hit, and then it would break off to like those other 3 and then do extra damage. But basically, unless you were standing still, you were never getting that full damage back. Like, it just wasn't happening, in which case you were doing, I would say, about similar damage to a regular Soul Spear. Except Soul Spear gets 2 uses, so why would you not just use that instead if you're doing about the same amount of damage? It also took longer to cast than Soul Spear, and also higher intellect requirement. So, yeah. Potentially usable, decent damage, a very high intellect requirement for it for what felt like an underwhelming spell. Great Magic Weapon, Crystal Magic Weapon, and Strong Magic Shield. All of those we never got to use. The idea being is that it applies your weapons with that particular magic. So like Great Magic Weapon would apply Arcane to your weapon, Crystal Magic Weapon would apply Crystal to your weapon, and Strong Magic Shield would give your shields additional Arcane damage reduction. All niche scenarios, but when they work out where you're like, I need magical damage to help me take down this enemy boss, etc. or whatever, would be worthwhile. The stats are not crazy in order to use them. They don't take up much room in your inventory as well of spells. And you get a decent amount of usages out of them. So, niche, but they fill a purpose. So, acceptable spells. Ball Control, one of the best spells in the game for utility alone. Very cheap to have equipped on you, very cheap in intellect to actually be able to use it, and an insane amount of uses for how long it actually applies to you. As we had seen when I was fighting the Necromancer lady, the ability to fall down like a million flights of stairs and still stay at full HP when before that I would have taken half my health plus is a huge benefit. It also helps people like me that are impatient and would rather not have to do the same run like 20 times the same way every time, when we could at the bare minimum get a little bit of entertainment out of just seeing what we could or couldn't get away with in terms of the fall damage, even with this equipped. Repair, we never ended up using it. It's just the same thing as a repair powder. You may as well just use a repair powder. There's just a consumable that literally does this, but it doesn't take up the magic slot. So I guess if you really needed it, fine, but it was a magic I never intended on using. So I guess if you really needed the repair at the time, then there you go. It's just like an extreme niche that just never came up for us. Gaslight essentially just lights up the area. Most areas where it's extremely dark, they would have a Pharos Lockstone, which would generally brighten up the area for you. So Gaslight never really came into use. It's got 9 uses, it's cheap, the intellect requirement is cheap, it's just a utility magic. The fact that they even made a magic for lighting up your area seems more so like a problem with maybe actually making the area too dark in general, or making areas too dark in general to be like, oh, I guess you should have used the light spell that we provided for you. And it's like, or you could have just made the area normal lighting, in which case this spell would never have needed to exist. So I guess very niche situation. If you really wanted to use it, go right ahead, but I never felt the need to. Chameleon is interesting. The ability to blend in with the environment might help you against invaders or whatever, if you're really willing to sit around for that long in order to keep your souls in a general area or whatever. Apparently this can be used in like PvE as well to potentially lose aggro from enemies. I played around with Chameleon before in Dark Souls 3, and it never really did anything, so I don't imagine in Dark Souls 2 it did much either. So cool concept, cool concept, but once put on paper, it just didn't really act as intended. Soul Flash, apparently the entire idea of it is to not do damage, but protect you. Yeah, really no reason for this spell to exist. There's no reason that you would take this spell ever over Repel. There's just no reason. Focus Souls, another one that I was very hyped for to immediately get disappointed by. Extremely expensive in terms of intelligence. This is with incense implied as well, and he's already at 57 intelligence. So, yeah. Very expensive intelligence, moderate cost towards how many spells you can hold on to you. And for the type of spell, for its requirements, 2 uses is about what you would expect. You essentially shoot like 4 different soul bolts into the air, which is still better than soul bolt, but also the amount of setup time and stuff that it took to use it just generally made it not usable, and I ended up throwing it away pretty much immediately after getting it and using all the resources on it. Which I should have figured from all the other spells by that point is probably how that was going to go, but I told myself I wanted to see every magic in the game, or at least that I could get access to, and yeah, that's that. We never really used miracles. I mean, heal is heal. Great heal, I believe, I want to say heal does about probably 50% of an Estus. Great heal does probably like 75%. Soothing Sunlight, very good for keeping your party alive, which is actually what helped us quite a bit in the Sir Aloe fight, I believe it was called, the knight that I really never wanted to fight. But yeah, 52 faith, and I'm pretty sure. Hey, yeah, no, we didn't apply incense to this one. So 52 faith, extremely high faith requirement. 2 is about what you would expect in that requirement. 2 uses, a little low, especially for a heal, but well, actually, I guess it's just 1 less between the other heals. So you know what? It's probably fine. It does the same thing as Great Heal, except it does it for your entire party. So if you're a Faith user, definitely one worthwhile to pick up to keep both you and your NPCs alive. Mid Force was essentially a knockback with damage. But there's cases for that, like if you can cheese enemies by pushing them off the edge of the map or whatever, so instead of having to fight this huge bulky enemy or whatever, you could have potentially just like knocked them off the cliff into the abyss, etc., etc. So a niche, really cheap, a decent use count, just niche, but fun to use for sure, especially when you do end up pushing something off the edge. You're like, got him. And yeah, that was there's definitely fun to be had with the mid-force, which is definitely a factor in the magic. Heavenly Thunder. Okay, this. I was really looking forward to Thunder magic when before, for a while, I didn't have any use of that, and I just kept thinking everything was going to be weak to it. So I was like, okay, I gotta find out Thunder magic. We finally found Thunder magic. The idea behind Heavenly Thunder is that it just shoots random thunderbolts at the ground around you. 17 faith, not too high of a requirement. Very easy to access, being only 1 slot, or 1 magic slot, so relatively cheap in that regard. So your 6 uses is pretty good for most spells. The problem with this spell is that it was too random, and it hit too far away from you. So if you tried to use it as an AoE spell, it would probably be about maybe 2 to 3 times your distance. In which case, it just gave the area too much. It just gave too much area for the random strikes. So I would get maybe like 1 or 2, even like right on top of an enemy. So cool in theory, just didn't play out in actuality. Thunder Spear takes forever to form. Hits for about the same as what everything else did, slightly above Soul Arrow, but for the amount of time that it took to cast, you could probably also cast 2 Soul Arrow, at which point you'd probably be getting about the same amount of damage. But if you needed the thunder damage, there's your thunder damage right there. Great Lightning Spear, same thing as Lightning Spear, except slightly higher in cost, 1 less use, but it does slightly more damage. It's kind of like the same way that Great Soul Arrow or whatever it was just the amount of time that it took to form versus a regular Lightning Spear, not generally worth it. You also get 1 less use, which probably ends up making Lightning Spear do more damage, in terms of if you actually got all the usages off beforehand. So, it's just really if you wanted thunder damage, there it is. Solid Ps, I don't believe we ever got it to work. Yeah, apparently inflicts heavy damage on mindless hollows, but then it even says has no effect on anything else. So unless you're fighting mindless hollows, literally a useless spell. Relatively cheap, I guess decent amount of uses for what you would expect. But yeah, extremely niche scenarios. But when it would work, so. Magical barrier, gray magical barrier. They gave you resistances to all of the magics, I believe. Yeah, it's a arcane magic, lightning, fire, and dark. So if you're fighting a sorcerer, these would be generally what you would throw on. So they had their uses. You only get 1 to 2 uses, depending on which one you use here, so definitely had to make sure of when you use it. But when you did use it, it would definitely have helped. Like when I was going through the one area with all of the water mages shooting me with arcane damage, probably could have used some of that and shrugged a bit more of it off. But I don't think I also had these yet at that time, so. Sacred Oath, extremely expensive for cost in your magic, which for me would be literally half my magic stack would be Sacred Oath. 3 uses, which is about what you'd expect. 25 faith. Not crazy on the faith, so it's really more in the cost of your magic. But it gives you a temporary damage and defense boost to everyone around you. So if you're gonna do like a faith build, you could have Soothing Sunlight, you could have Sacred Oath, and you could play like full support. And yeah, I mean, if you're a support main, then you just grab Soothing Sunlight, Sacred Oath, and yeah, pretty much just give everybody AoE healing, AoE attack, or you know, an attack boost and a defense boost. So if you're a straight up support, you could throw these 2 on, and then everybody would love you for being a support. Outside of summoning NPCs and stuff, if you're straight up playing the game solo like I did, generally not a use for it. I mean, sometimes we got it on the summons, but against the bosses, they weren't really doing that much damage anyways. So there's a use case for it if you get, you know, if you're summoning real people in and stuff, and they get that extra attack and defense boost. There's a use case, but it really relies on people playing the game in your area, and also having to deal with Dark Souls 2 nonsense of summoning, where you need to be 100% human in order to be able to summon people. So yeah, definitely quality of life change that needed to happen, which did in Dark Souls 3, so very happy that that ended up changing, because that was getting real dumb, and you can definitely tell in my fight against the knight character. The fact that I need to probably use about 10 or so human effigies just to get my summons back every time, even though I'd be missing maybe like 10% of my max HP or whatever, but then being forced to use a human effigy in order to get them back was just really annoying. Sunlight Blade, I believe, applies thunder damage to your weapon. Yeah, gives you lightning damage on like your sword or whatever, similar to the great magic weapons and stuff. If you need thunder damage and you're a sword wielder and somehow have 36 faith on you, there's your way to get thunder damage. Splintering Lightning Spear. This one, again, I was very hyped for it just to get immediately let down, which definitely helped fix my idea that magic in this game is not quite that great, but it exists. One slot is not crazy. That's actually really good for what the magic is. Now, I know we lowered the faith on this one. I don't remember by how much. I want to say it was probably closer to like 50 faith, so extremely expensive in that. Definitely need to be dedicated to it. 2 uses is about what you would expect. Essentially, your dude would throw a thunder spear up in the air, it would create a circle, and then a whole bunch of thunder would come down. Yeah, problem being with that, though, is that it only had 1 damage instance. As in, if you threw it and you hit a guy, even though you'd see, like, 10 plus thunderbolts come down from it, they would only take damage 1 time, even if they stood in it the entire time. Which almost seems more like a bug than anything, because why would you make an AoE thunder spell, but then somebody could stand in it the entire time and then only take 1 damage from it? So I don't know if that's just a spell that didn't work as intended, or if it was just a bad spell, because if that is supposed to be how it was intended, and it was just meant to be a larger AoE or whatever, the casting time's too long, the damage is too low, and the requirements are too high, if that's the case. If it was, you were supposed to get multiple thunder procs, but it just wasn't, then there might be a case for it. Fireball, starting fire magic, generally what you would expect of it. The one saving grace I will say about pyromancy in general is it requires no intellect or faith to actually use pyromancy. It only requires it only requires spell slots, and yeah, that's generally it. 9 uses. General problem with pyromancy: low range. It generally takes longer to cast than most other magic. And a decent amount of enemies in this game mitigate fire damage just because of the way that they are. Now, some are weak to it, in which case, you've got your exceptions there, but generally I didn't find pyromancy all that useful. It was fun to use, don't get me wrong, and the accessibility to pyromagic is probably the easiest in the game due to its lack of requirements in general in order to use it. Of course, that plays across in the damage that it does and some of the other things, like its longer casting time and less range. Overall, I don't think it generally ended up being worth it, but if you love your pyromancy, you're going to love your pyromancy and you're going to use it anyways. Fireball, Fire Orb, and Great Fireball are essentially all the same thing. It's just a fireball thrown at an enemy. You get a lot less uses going from regular Fireball, the Fire Orb, the Great Fireball. Like 4 uses is average, 3 uses is slightly below average. And then you get on the Firestorm, Fire Tempest, and Chaos Storm. Now, the Chaos Storm is the best of these because it sends up the most pillars as well as does the most damage between these. So, if you're gonna use any Firestorm or Fire Tempest or Chaos Storm, just get Chaos Storm. I'm pretty sure I originally found this in the Keep, and what I had to do was use Flash Split and run into one of the water barrels. It gave me enough fire defense to run over the entire lava area, which we originally couldn't do. And I believe that's how I got Chaos Storm. So yeah, if you're gonna use any of these AoE fire ones, just use Chaos Storm. And you got Combustion and Great Combustion. Now, I really tried to make a use case for these. I really wanted these to work. It casts really fast. It has no range, but it does really good pyro damage. Problem being, of course, when you're a ranged character and you got no defense, you're not generally looking to run up to a boss and throw fire in its face. It kind of just is what it is. Fire Whip is an interesting spell. You get 4 uses, is relatively decent. Problem being is it takes too long to cast. Like, it seems like they tried to be, like, really artsy with it, but then forgot that, like, you know, people can actually attack you while using the spell. And, yeah, just generally took too long, and for the damage that it did, for how long that it took, generally just wasn't worth it for me. Let's see. The Poison Mist, apparently it works on some bosses. If you could get it to work, cool. Otherwise, I generally didn't find it that usable. Acid Surge, I can only imagine this is for PvP because it destroys the target's equipment. Which if you're fighting in PvP and you notice somebody has a lot of breakable armor or armor that breaks really quickly, you could throw this out and you could break all their armor. And you're like, what does that do for you? Well, breaking all of their armor essentially reduces that armor's defensive stats, I want to say by half, if not lower. So if you're fighting somebody and you know they have a weak armor, you could throw it on there in terms of like how quickly it'll break, and then if you break their armor, all of a sudden you could potentially drop their defense by half, which is insane. Then you could be going from swinging your sword for 100, I don't know, like 150 or 200, and then all of a sudden you're swinging for like 300 or something for each hit. Which, you know, depending on their HP, like if it was mine, I think I would die in like 5 or 6 hits at that point. So yeah, pretty good. I keep pressing buttons on here, is why that's happening. Oops. Alright, what else do we have here? Lingering Flame. Very, very cool spell. Problem with it was, it seemed like it was only usable for the NPCs. Whenever I would use it, my dude would take an extremely long amount of time. He would just sit there with the firebomb in his hand, and then he would eventually throw it. And then even when we throw it, it took a decent amount of time to go off. It did quite a bit of damage, but overall it just took too long to set up, and it also requires the enemy to be dumb enough to walk into it. Now, if you're fighting regular NPCs, it's fine. If you're trying to throw it in PvP, probably not going to happen unless you can force them into it. Although if you do force them into it, Flame Swathe, generally a good spell. The problem being is that you need the enemy to really not be moving, or you need to stagger them or something to get them in the damage. But if you do, it did quite a bit of damage. It's just that requirement is so hard to fulfill that it makes it generally not worthwhile. Like, how many enemies in the game stay still long enough for you to cast a spell? Not too many. Especially without targeting, because the spell only has targeting from when you cast it. So if you're standing like right here and then you move over here, but it was originally casting at this first one, you're already far enough away from your first position when it originally targets to there that you're just not going to get hit by. Flash Sweat, situational. It really just seemed more like an exploration thing. It increases your fire defense, so you were able to go around places like the Iron Keep and get items. Now in theory, they're like, oh, you can use it against other pyromancers. But really, if you took this spell into the PvP and they're a pyromancer and they see you use this, they're probably just going to switch to some other magic, because presumably if you can use pyromancy, more than likely you can use some of the other stuff, in which case if they see you pop this or attempt to pop this, they're just going to smack you with some other magic. So really just for exploration. Warmth is fire healing magic. It's over a period of time. It's like periodical. It's kind of like burst healing. Not too crazy a burst healing, but it's a burst healing and over time. So like you'll get a burst heal, you'll wait like 5 seconds, you'll get another burst heal, wait another 5 seconds, get a burst heal. So generally you have to sit right on top of it to get the healing, but it's other healing magic, so if you need healing magic, and you don't want to put anything intelligence or faith, then warmth's there for you. You got forecast, which is actually higher than all of the other heal and great heal, so actually not that bad of a heal, thinking about it. Generally better used outside of combat than in it, but I suppose you might be able to get away with it. It doesn't take that long to cast. Immolation is you lighting yourself on fire and the general area on fire. Problem is, you know, when you light yourself on fire, you take damage along with it. So if you're tanky enough to withstand the damage and you want pyro damage, here's your spell. You've got a lot of uses of it. For somebody like me that had no HP throughout the entire game, it just never became a viable option for me, so we didn't really use it. Then you got Fire Snake. Similar to the Fire Whip, it seems like they got a bit artsy with it, and usability kind of came out the window in the fact that it took too long to use, and the damage on it was like average at best, so it also requires 2 slots and only has 2 uses, so generally not that viable. Dance of Fire, similar to the Fire Snake and Fire Whip, except I believe this uses Chaos Magic, or not Chaos, but well, yeah, I guess Chaos Magic, like how there's Chaos Storm, there's like slightly higher Pyro damage. Only costs 1 slot, not bad. 3 uses, not bad. It just generally takes too long. It's just a long sweeping motion of fire, so nothing crazy, but usable. So that's generally my thoughts about spells in this game. And that's me after using basically all of them. That was like one of the main goals, was to see all the magic in the game and see how it would play out. Unfortunately, we generally set on Dark Orb and Homing Spear, but I still enjoyed playing with the others regardless. Yeah, so I was really expecting those bosses to take longer, so I thought that's what we were going to be doing today. But yeah, no, we got this. I don't know if Dark Souls 1 is set up yet, so I'm thinking we'll end it here. I'll make sure I have it set up tomorrow, but tomorrow we'll be playing Legends of Arceus, because I put it off for too long. I wanted to play it the day of, which is why I literally pre-ordered it. But then Best Buy is like, oh yeah, we'll ship it to you. And then I just now got it 4 or 5 days later after release, which is like, you know, kind of defeating the purpose of the pre-order. But, you know, I guess that's what I get for not using people like Amazon for that. Or just like straight up buying. So, you know. Any case, there's my Twitter. I always send out a stream before, or, wow, words are hard, you know, sometimes. Alright, let's try that again. I always send out a tweet before my stream, so if you guys see that, make sure to follow it, and then go ahead and join. Make sure to follow that, and then go ahead and join the stream, because as soon as you see the tweet, within the next 5 minutes or so, we're going to be streaming. We've always got the title of the game within the tweet itself, so that way you guys know what we're going to be streaming that day. And generally, if you see the stream before, I generally have an idea of what we're going to be playing the next day. At least for now. We'll see about that in the future, won't we? Below that, there's my YouTube channel. Go ahead and like, comment, subscribe over there. It's an archive of all our old Twitch VODs. So if you guys are new, just came in or whatever, and you haven't seen some of our older stuff, we've got a full playthrough of Bloodborne, including the DLC. Same thing with Dark Souls 3, including the DLC. And now we've completed all of Dark Souls 2, including the DLC. So if you're a Souls fan, plenty of content to watch. If you're a Resident Evil fan, I've got all the Resident Evils 0 through 8, Revelations 1 and 2, and also Code Veronica. So if you're a Resident Evil fan, or a Dark Souls fan, we got all that covered for you. We've also got a few other hidden gems in there, so go ahead and check those out if you're liking the other content. Under that, we've got our Discord. If you guys don't know what Discord is, it's just generally another area for you guys to be able to hang out. Also another way for you guys to get notifications and knowing when I'm going to stream and whatnot. So if you guys don't like Twitter or whatever, but you still want to get notified of streams, when I'm going to stream, if I'm going to stream, what I'm going to stream, etc., etc., or if you just want to hang out, talk and chill, I generally look at Discord currently more than I do Twitter. So go ahead and join that if you want. It's all free, of course. There's bots in there you can play around with. And yeah, I was really expecting this to be a much longer stream than what it actually was here. So appreciate everybody for coming out here. We'll go ahead and we're gonna play Legends of Arceus tomorrow if I can get the work. If we can't get it to work, I'll play Dark Souls 1. I'll start Dark Souls 1. We're not gonna finish the entire thing in one stream. Let's not get crazy now. But I'll definitely play Dark Souls 1 tomorrow if I can't get Legends of Arceus to work. If I can get Legends of Arceus to work, though, we're definitely playing that because I've been looking forward to it. So, yeah. That's the general plan for tomorrow. You guys have a good one. We'll see you then. If anything, if you guys are liking the content, go ahead and hit me up with a follow on Twitch. We'll work on Twitter, we'll work on YouTube, we'll work on Discord later. If anything, let's get Twitch going, let's get those 50 followers, let's hit affiliate status, so that way I can keep videos up here longer, and we can start using more than just BTTV emotes and whatnot, so yeah. So let's go ahead and try and do that, if at all possible. All that being said, you guys have a good day, night, afternoon, whatever time it is for you guys. And we'll see you tomorrow with either some Dark Souls if I can't figure out how to stream from the Switch, or we'll be playing some Pokemon Legends of Arceus. So if you're a Dark Souls fan, you've got your Dark Souls filled for a little bit, we'll play some Pokemon Legends of Arceus. And if I can't get the work, then Dark Souls enjoyers rejoice as we'll play some Dark Souls 1. Alright, enough said. We'll see you guys tomorrow, as far as I'm aware, of course. Something could happen, we'll see how it goes. I might actually have to do something tomorrow, so we'll see how it goes. I don't think it necessarily involves me, but something tells me I might somehow get wrapped into what I'm thinking that I might get wrapped up in, so. Alright, enough song. You guys have a good one. We'll see you tomorrow, as long as nothing goes down.